На трибунах аллеют знамена, облака в поднебесье плывут. На зеленом ковре стадиона разноцветные майки цветут.
Hello and welcome back to the Russian Football News Podcast. We've all taken a short vacation here at RFN Towers during the winter break, and I think I speak for the entire Russian football family to say that I'm pretty darn excited that the real football is finally on its way back. Today we're going to ease our way back in by discussing our team of the autumn. So to do so, I'm your host, James Nichols, and I'll be joined by David Sanson. Good Christmas, David.
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Novi Gordon. Good to be back. I'm looking forward to it. 2 weeks to go.
And of course, Wigan's own Richard Pike. And how was your holiday period, Rich?
So Novi Gordon. Yes, it was good, guys. Really enjoyed it. Absolutely delighted to be back. Been catching up on some Wigan Athletic games, some Premier League matches, Serie A and La Liga. And I've got some good people to follow now with Kokorin now playing his trade in Italy. And been catching up on those leagues, but absolutely delighted to get back to the grind of the RPL. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's good to see Kokorin finally going and making that big move to one of the European Farmers Leagues. And of course, now the RPL is starting again. It's the real big boys are back in action. So if we get straight into the action, this is the team of the autumn. Now, firstly, I'll go through a methodology, and that's basically the same as when we picked the team of the season at the back end of the 2019-20 season, in which the players themselves have to have performed at a high level over the course of the season, or half season in this case as a whole. And this is not necessarily the best 11 players in these positions in the league, but it's just bringing form into account and who we believe has performed best per position in our point of view. Now, we've gone for a 4-2-3-1 formation this time in order to get a nice balanced number of players into the team. From here in, we'll each propose a player from our own individual lists. So each position will get 3 nominations, and therein we'll discuss who will make the final RFN team of the autumn. So to start between the sticks with the goalkeeper, my own nominations: Krasodar's young starlet Matvey Safonov. David, who do you suggest?
My top pick for goalkeeper was Khimki's Ilya Lantratov, who's had an excellent season for me.
And Richard, who's your choice in goal?
I had a few candidates. I thought about. I've put down Safonov as one. I echo David's thoughts. I think Lantratov has really impressed this season. He's been linked over the winter break with some of the bigger teams in the league. And I put Shunin down as well as a possible contender at Dinamo. But I feel in recent weeks that Safonov has been a key part of Krasodar's resurgence. So I probably would tip out of the ones on my shortlist. I'll probably just about go with Safonov.
Yeah, and I think Safonov is really coming of age this season. Of course, he did, unfortunately for him, make a high-profile string of errors in that one particular Champions League game against Chelsea. But it must be remembered that in the games preceding that, especially against PAOK in the playoffs, and then after that, in the win against Rennes, Safonov was arguably Krasodar's man of the match. And when he first broke into the team, he really had developed a little bit of a mistake here and there, but it didn't seem to be anything that was too worrying at the time. And it was definitely seemingly just something that came with age and lack of experience. And of course, as a goalkeeper gets older, they mature even further. They've got the highest average age of when they reach peak performance. And I think Safonov's going to be probably the long-term successor to Igor Akinfeyev's crown in Russia's goal. Now, I will have to say that I'll eat my own hat a little bit here, as I've previously went on record of saying that Maximenko and Safonov at the start of the season were on pretty much a level playing field, and I expected Maxi to be the one to step forwards and really take the game by the scruff of the neck. But unfortunately, he's just far too mistake prone in very big games as well. It seems to be whenever Spartak play in a Moscow derby or plays Zenit, that's when Maxi decides to make his huge costly error, in spite of also making a spate of really good saves. David, what's your thoughts on Safonov this season?
I've always been a big fan of Safonov. As you said, you were always on Maxi's side, and I was always leaning more towards Safonov. Other than that the one game where, the Hudson-Odoi shot, which he let slip through his hands, he's an excellent goalkeeper. We know he is the future for that club. But I just felt, obviously, I haven't chosen him. He was my backup choice. I felt Lantratov, his role towards his team was bigger than Safonov's for Krasnodar. But we love Safonov. I love Safonov. Maximenko's weirdly be getting a lot of the press. He featured in AS, I think, in Spain recently. Is like he's profiled as a big foreign talent. It's going to be a long competition between him and Safonov for the national team. I think rightly at the moment Safonov is in the lead. He's the first of the two to have received a call up to Spornaya. So I love him, and we've seen goalkeepers come from Eastern Europe, like for example Andrew Lunin, who moved off to Real Madrid when he was very young. So if Safonov's got the talent, goalkeepers are always a bit of a high commodity in football because it's a valuable player to get, and you feel like at some point someone will try and take a punt on a talented goalkeeper like himself.
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier that some of his early mistakes in the RPL seemed to be very much down to lack of experience at the time, and those three against Chelsea, he, for a little while it was being peppered with a few shots that seemed uncharacteristic the way that he reacted to them, and he really did look a little bit like a deer in headlights in that one match. Obviously playing the English side for the first time, which is, without trying to sound like I've my English bias here, but the most highly watched league in the world, not necessarily the best, but definitely the most highly watched league. And it maybe felt that playing in the first big game against such a big team in the biggest competition in domestic European football or international European football, that he did suffer under the pressure slightly. David, so you also, to come straight back to yourself, you also nominated Ilya Lantratov at Kimki. What's impressed yourself about him so much this season?
Well, I mean, last season in the FNL, he wasn't always first choice. He was competing with another goalkeeper who I forget who it was, but it's another goalkeeper who's got good pedigree in Russia, and he earned the spot in the team. He's still very young. He's only just turned 25, I think. But he's just got them out of so many situations. I mean, it's just another case of Russia producing another very good, for their league standard, goalkeeper. We've talked about it before, and I've talked about it on the other podcast with Hanu and Artyom. Just like the level of Russian goalkeeping is very consistent. Like after the top 2 or 3 goalies, you've got probably 10 or 11 goalies who are very good, rather than having anyone who's particularly bad. And Lantratov is coming through as another excellent, for RPL standard, goalkeeper. We've seen it before with clubs who come up and we have a goalkeeper who comes up with them and has a really good season. Dupin did it for Angie. Dovnia did it for SKA Khabarovsk a few years back as well. And this season, Lantratov has done it for Khimki. And, Khimki are having a good season, so you wouldn't expect him to be moving on anytime soon. But he's one of those players, anytime a youngish goalkeeper comes through, you're thinking, is that going to be who Siska eventually go for to replace Akinfeev? Because, Akinfeev's getting to that point where next 2 or 3 years, he's probably going to start thinking about retirement, you would imagine. There was rumours even last summer that he was going to retire. So every time a goalie comes through, you're thinking, is that going to be the guy who Siska go for in the end? So, yeah, it's an interesting one. But, he's had an excellent season in a team who are performing above expectations. And yeah, that's why I picked him.
I must admit, Lantratov is definitely high on my list. He has been overperforming in what was at the start of the season a dreadful Kimki side. They were far too aggressive. The defence was absolutely all over the place, and really since he got Shevchenko's appointment as manager, have Kimki then stepped up and they signed what they needed in what was some very experienced RPL players to complement the quite promising youth in the ranks, and since then they've went from strength to strength and were actually the form team in the entire league at one point before the close of the winter break. But having said that, during the entire season, Lantratov was the man in form. Now I know that he shipped 7 against Krasnodar back in September, but if you look at the goals back, they're either all screamers or just incredibly well worked goals where he's got absolutely no choice. Like the Berg 1-on-1, there's nothing you could do about that. If he saves that, he's a hero. But if he doesn't, then to be quite honest, he's expected not to in that situation against an international level striker like Marcus Berg. So I definitely could jump on and choose Lantratov in a little bit of a curveball, to be quite honest, because like I say, all the others have, like you said, David, so all the others are so quite close together that it could literally be one of 4 or 5 people. In my list that we all put together beforehand, our own personal little lists, I had down 4 goalkeepers, and one of which, Anton Shunin, had some real torrid time in Europe for Dynamo Moscow this season, losing pretty dreadfully against what is at best being kind to the sides. Minnows that you really should expect them to beat. But in the league, he has been particularly very solid. Richard, what's your thoughts on Lantratov? Could you perhaps be convinced by David to go Lantratov over Safonov?
I'm still going to stick with Safonov, but I definitely will highlight that Lantratov has made a huge impact to Himki. And the game that really stands out in my mind, as David said, and the game that really stands out in my mind is the Lokomotiv game right before the winter break. And I remember the first half, that was a game of 2 halves. The first half, Lokomotiv were all over Himki, and there was some brilliant goalkeeping from Lantratov, kept Himki in the game. And then the second half, Himki just, it was like they clicked another switch and it was totally different. They totally dominated Lokomotiv. And it was Lantratov's interventions that kept them in the game. And then in the second half, they just found another gear and completely outplayed Lokomotiv. It was absolutely superb from them. And it's interesting how, Saskawa were mentioned as a potential destination for Lantratov. The 2 sides actually I did see him linked with in the winter window were actually Lokomotiv and Zenit, and both of those 2 at the minute, you could argue, it's getting to the stage where they probably both do need goalkeepers, because obviously Guillaume is getting to an age at Lokomotiv where he'll soon need replacing too. Zenit definitely need a goalkeeper. I mean, Lunyov and Kurtzikov are both out of contract in the summer, and that could be a nice cheap pickup for Zenit. So I could see there being a tug of war between 3 or 4 of the top Russian clubs, and even Shunin himself is not the youngest, It's only really at the minute you'd say Spartak with Maximenko and Krasnodar with Safonov, who are pretty sorted with their goalkeepers, but the other big Russian clubs, I suspect, will be fighting it out for Lantratov's services. So it'll be fascinating to see who wins that particular fight for his services, either this summer or going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lantratov, of course, he has been linked with. Was it Zenit the latest, Richard? Wasn't it? I believe it was, wasn't it?
Zenit and Lokomotiv, both of them.
Lokomotiv as well, yeah. And both, in my opinion, could do with some fresh blood between the sticks. And it would be interesting to see how Lantratov would get on a team higher placed up the table, without being disrespectful to Kimki, of course. But if you go through some of the goalkeeping statistics, this is from SofaScore, which is one I usually use the most, is for general rating, which is an algorithm based upon pure statistics alone, nothing else aside from that. Matvei Safonov has actually got the highest, and then Maximenko behind him in second. So of course the two are right up there next. These two are right up there next to each other, as they usually are. But one thing that I like about Lantratov is when you go through a negative statistics, as opposed to most saves, most clean sheets, most penalty saves, and so on, is you go through the errors leading to a goal, errors leading to a shot, and so on. He's 0 on every single one, while also being third on most saves and first on most shots faced. So Safonov has only made 59 saves this season. I mean, only it's a very good number. It's more than most in the league. But Lantratov's made 75. He's made 44 saves from inside of the box alone. He's had 5 runs out, and he's got the highest percentage in terms of short passing here. Now, this is a Kimki team who do play quite direct. Now, those distribution figures are very impressive. I didn't expect him to have higher distribution figures than Safonov, to be quite honest, judging by the way that Krasnodar play their football. But what I'm really most impressed by is concentration levels. To face that many shots, make that many saves, yet not make a single error leading to a goal at all. as a goalkeeper is quite outstanding, to be honest, and there's no other word for it. It's brilliant. Goalkeepers often get the worst job in football in the fact that you've got a striker who could score one goal but then miss 8 sitters and make 10 mistakes, and he's the hero. A goalkeeper could make 10 saves, make one error, and he's the villain of the piece. That's just the lonely, solitary life of a goalkeeper. And I think David, yourself, and I think some of these stats are maybe edging me towards Lantratov too. If I think it's 1-0 to David already so early, because you just go through and it's just name after name. It's just Lantratov again and again.
Here we
The
go.
only man higher is Rezhikov, who has also made more mistakes than anybody else in the league, leading to a goal.
The only other name that I thought about, and actually one that sort of ties into the Siska situation, is Pomazun over at Ural, because he moved there on loan and immediately displaced Godzur, who'd been Ural's number one for at least 2 or 3 seasons, and he's been pretty good over there, and it gives you something to look forward to for Siska, at least, because he's going to go back to Siska at some point, and you feel like they are going to give him a go. And I did consider him as, I didn't pick a third choice, but he might have been up there for most as third choice. But that's a promising situation there for Siska. Pomazun, he would only ever get the cup games for Siska in the past, and never really got the chance to show what he could do. But he's been very good there. That's a good young goalie. Again, but will he deal with the pressure back at Siska again if it happened? Just something to tie it all in. But yeah, I'm glad I'm winning the goalkeeper debate here.
I must admit, I would never have expected 6 months ago to be sitting here and say that Kimki's goalkeeper is the best goalkeeper in the autumn part of the season. But strange things do happen, of course. And if we do next move on straight on to right back. Now, right back last season for our team of the season caused a little bit of a stir online, as many thought that we overlooked a certain Mario Fernandez and in favour of picking, in the end, Vyacheslav Karavayev at right back in what was a clean sweep of Zenit defenders, as all 4 of their regular starters actually picked up the 4 spots in our team of the season. So, David, who's your nomination for right back?
Let's see. My nomination for right back was indeed Mr. Mario Fernandez. I would say more because of a lack of a better choice rather than he deserved it. I mean, we know he's going to be good. He's consistently very good. But I don't think there was anyone that really stood out necessarily. But he's still an obvious pick because of just how good he is as a footballer.
Richard, your choice for right back?
Again, I think it's between those two, Karavayev and Fernandez, but I'm in agreement with David there. I think Fernandez gets the nod from me this time. He's been once again a beacon of consistency in a Siska side, which is, it's still up there challenging for the title, but it's had its ups and downs. A horrible moment in Europe, of course, but domestically, I think Fernandez has been very solid. And he gets my vote. I'm going to go for Fernandez this time round.
Yeah, I must admit, my first choice was, of course, Mario as well. I would like to do a little bit of RFN bingo here, and of course, as long-term listeners know that one of our contributors and regular on the pod, Andrew Flint, is a huge Ural fan, and I will just put a little word in for Denis Kulikov, who's, even at the age of 84 that he is now, he's been surprisingly consistent for Ural, having a pretty solid season. But yeah, it has to be Mario this season. Mario's just, like you said, I like what you said there, Richard, a beacon of consistency. When Siska calls for aid, Mario will answer. He's just the one player in defence in this league that you think he absolutely should and would quite easily make it at one of the top 5 leagues. David, what do you think?
I think we need more Lord of the Rings references on the podcast. I mean, I think it's too late. I think he's missed the boat for any move to Europe really now. I mean, we all know the story that he was close to going to, was it Barcelona? Whatever Jose Mourinho, Barcelona or Real Madrid, wasn't it? I can't remember which one, wherever Jose was. And it fell apart for whatever reason. And then he ended up going to Siska, and now he plays as a Russian international. So we all know the story. he had his chance, and then I'm sure there were times during his Siska career where there was probably moments he could have done it. And unfortunately, the chance where he got to really show it on the biggest stage, 2018 World Cup, he was sort of already past the age where big clubs are going to be investing in a right back. Let's just say Cisco are going to demand like 15 mil. Clubs weren't necessarily going to cough up 15 mil for however old he was at the time, 30, 31-year-old right back.
Yeah.
So that was just a shame that his big platform came a bit too late for him. He's always done it in Europe, but that was the big one, which is a shame. But we love him. He's a great player. I actually didn't even consider Karavayev just because I didn't think he'd be very good for starters. For not overly good, not compared to last season where he was excellent. He's also been injured a little bit recently, and as I recall, he was the one who gave away that really stupid penalty against Dortmund, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
My second choice,
actually, I've forgotten about that.
my second choice was actually, although he's only played 5 or 6 games there, was actually Alexei Sutormin at Zenit, who obviously we all know is a wide player or a forward. And he's been so good, like as a wing back. Like I think he picked up something like 2 goals and 4 assists or something since he started playing at wing back. Something ridiculous. And as Hanu and Artyom were dubbing him the Russian Cafu towards the end of the season there. And I just really think he's just shone playing at wing back there in the run into the winter break. I think Karavayev's back now, so it's a shame that he probably won't last. But I just wanted to give him a little shout out.
Yeah, absolutely. It is one of those cases of, on pure recent form, he's probably been the best performing right back in the league since he moved there. But I just personally can't really vindicate giving it to him because, as you said, he's barely played any time there whatsoever. And then when you do look at that's Karavayev mistake. Jesus, I don't try to be too harsh on a player when they do make a single mistake, but when it's either a repeat offender like Kaio, for example, in Europe, when it's the same silly mistake again and again, just lack of concentration, being far too rash, or if it's pure stupidity like that one was. He's marking the smallest man in the pitch in Torgan Hazard, who's 5'5", and he decides to just drag him down by grabbing him by the arms in the middle of the penalty area, when his entire team have been working their arse off, defending absolutely brilliantly for the best part of 80 minutes. It was just rank unforgivable at the time. And I know it's, like I say, it's the opposite of the Sutormin one, where I can't put Sutormin in because he only performed in that position for 5 games. But then again, I'm not putting Karavayev in because he made that one big mistake once in a season. But it's such a massive one. It's one of those where you just can't get out of the back of your mind. And I think lots of Zenit fans will perhaps agree that he definitely hasn't been as strong this season. And if you're a Zenit fan listening, get in touch with us on Twitter at Russ Football News and let us know your thoughts on Karavayev this season. Just let us know how he's getting on.
I don't think his attacking output's been as high as it was last year. It seemed like last year he was constantly getting forward and making assists and stuff like that. And I just checked this season. Sutormin in 5 matches got more assists than Karavayev got in the whole of the season so far.
Yeah.
3 assists versus 2.
Yeah.
3 assists in 5 games. So that was quite interesting. But it's a shame, really, if Karavayev is back, which I'm pretty sure he is, that Sutormin's run is going to potentially end in the team there, because it would have been nice to see it carry on.
Yeah, it's pretty much damning on Karavayev that Sutormin's even in the conversation, because to move what is ostensibly one of the purest attacking wingers in the league. I mean, when Sutormin is playing on the wing, he doesn't track back whatsoever. That's why we're all kind of so surprised by how effective and strong he has been in defence and attack at right back. So the fact that he's even in the conversation and had to be converted as a right back to make up for the ground that Karavayev is clearly losing and clearly struggling is probably a bigger damning verdict upon Karavayev than anything else. But such is when you get, say, a greatest film of the year or a greatest player of the year, such as the how far ahead they are, that you spend the entire time talking about other people and not about them because you don't necessarily need to, is why we've barely mentioned Mario Fernandes in this conversation, because he's just been that solid and that effective at right back, and he is our first choice right back in the team of the autumn. So to move on to central defence now, David, who's your first central defender nomination?
Oh, my list closed. My first nomination was Roman Yevgenyev of Dynamo Moscow.
And Richard?
Yeah, centre half was an interesting one. There was a few on my short list. I had the Spartak two down, Zhigo, Zhakia, Lovren, and Diveyev. I'd actually forgotten about Yevgenyev. That's another good shout as well. It's quite a difficult position to pick, central defender, actually. If I was pressed, I think
You
he's
are
also
pressed.
chipped. I am pressed. He's chipped in with a few goals this season for Spartak, and I've really liked him at the back for them. So I'm going to go with Zhigo, actually. Samuel Zhigo.
Yeah, all of these names mentioned are also on my nomination lists, but in the interest of getting as many players mentioned as possible, I'm going to go with Murillo at Lokomotiv this season. Now, I will preface this by saying that I think Murillo is worthy of a solid mention here because he's been a beast at centre back, been one of the signings of the season. But Murillo's really shone in Europe under Nikolic, and in the RPL, he's not struggled because he's still been very good, but he just hasn't performed to quite as high a level as he has in Europe. And in Europe, he's really stepping up to the plate, and I think part of that is just by the nature of Lokomotiv's game. He is very much a defender who's, like any defender, doesn't really like getting turned. And that happens quite a lot when Loco are playing in domestic games because they push very high up the pitch, have a very high defensive line. Against, say, the Bayern Munich and Atletico and all those games in the Champions League, he was probably Lokomotiv's star player when Vedran Choluka went off at half time injured against Bayern, I think it was, in the first big game. He didn't take the captain's armband, but he became the leader of the defence. He told Slobodan Rajkovic alongside him what to do, where to go. And to tell Slobodan Rajkovic what to do for 90 minutes is a considerably harder job than any any other defender in the local team. So, but I think there's, out of these nominations here we've mentioned, it would be remiss to not go with, personally, what you said, David, is in Roman Yevgenyev. He's just came out of nowhere this season. Or has he, David? What do you think?
Well, obviously, he was breaking through last year, and even this year, there's been a couple of moments. The one that sticks in my head where I was a bit concerned for him was, I think right at the start of the season, because let's say it was against Yevgeny Lutsenko, who was obviously been injured, and we all know Lutsenko's a big bulky striker, and I remember there was a big ball got whipped down to the left wing, and Lutsenko bullied Yevgenyev and beat him to the ball, and Arsenal scored as a result of it. And that one sticks in my head. And I can't remember if that was even at the tail end of last season because the seasons were so close together. But Dinamo obviously under Schwartz this year, they've really been firing. They've got a good, solid young core of players in that team. A lot of them homegrown. Yevgenyev being one of them. I think he's even been captaining them quite consistently as well. He's only 20 years old. Got his first cap for the national team as well. So it's been a big breakthrough season for him. He was obviously had established himself a little bit in the squad last year and was making appearances. But this year he's really established himself as being one of the first team picks for the squad. And for that reason, his great on the ball skills that he's got, his good defensive prowess was why I decided to pick him as my first choice.
Yeah, for the majority of last season, it seemed it was mainly either Sunjic or Dets or Rikov who were being chosen at centre, who were being picked at centre back by the former manager, and he was just a bit part player. I think he made quite a string of games towards the end of last season, and I remember in the final game against Orenburg, he actually played quite well, although Dinamo lost that match 1-0. And it was the Arsenal Tula game at the start of the season, because before that, Dinamo had played Ural, Rota, and Rostov and kept 3 clean sheets in all 3 games, got 7 points out of 3 to start the season. We're right flying up there. I think they won 4 of the first 5. And then, of course, the player that you get rid of, your old player, comes back to haunt you. And then it was Yevgeny Letsunka who pushed him off the ball and then crossed it in for Lesovoy to tap it in. And that's only, to be fair, to Yevgeniev, that's the only game that he's really struggled in. And that was when you're seeing his lack of physical, not physical prowess, he's a big strong lad, but lack of experience to combat Lutsenka's own physical
it
prowess.
was definitely that.
Come into
Like
place.
I think he just had him, I think he just put him on the wrong side. Didn't have the right body shape for the battle. I think they went shoulder to shoulder, and Lutsenko therefore had the leverage to get around him. And it was just purely that. You know, it's something you'd expect a young player to learn from, and hopefully he will. And I think he got slated a little bit on his Russia debut. Was that? I have a feeling. I want to say he debuted in the Serbia game, but maybe I'm wrong. But I have a feeling he got some stick in that game. Was he one of the guys that came off at half time? I forget. Here I am scrambling to try and remember. But I know at the very least he got a cap, and we're all very happy for him. Please leave me alone now.
Yeah, I think it's been one of the reasons why Dinamo's defence has been so strong this season. And of course, before Schwarz had joined, a lot of that was because they did sit quite deep. But Dinamo have been transformed under Schwarz. Richard, do you think?
Absolutely, yes. I know they had that rocky run at the end before the winter break with those losses to Sochi and to Zenit. But yeah, overall, there was definitely a massive improvement under Sandro Schwarz, including Roman Yevgeniev. I think he'll mature into a very good player there under Schwartz's guidance. And Dinamo have a good run of games coming up after the winter break, so I think that will equalise the slightly disappointing end to the fixtures before the winter break. So absolutely. And to expand on your point about Murillo, James, that's kind of the reason why I didn't really include him either. I thought his performances in the Champions League were probably more stand out than in the RPL. So just thought I'd throw that in there. But yeah, Yevgeniev, having thought about it, I think he'll be in contention. I've just really liked watching Gigo this season. I think, as I say, for Tedesco and for Spartak, he's a real leader there for them, and he's always a threat at set pieces. So that was kind of my reasoning for picking Gigo.
I think Gigo's definitely been Spartak's most accomplished defender. His runs out of defence to link to midfield is one of the vital parts of how Spartak can dominate games, both in terms of possession and territory. The one thing I would say about Gigo, though, is Spartak at times this season have been quite a glass cannon, and all of their defenders are prone to far too many mistakes. They're not anymore, but at one point they had scored the least from set pieces in general, but they'd conceded the most from set pieces from anyone in the league. And at one point it looked like if you were going to play Spartak, all you had to do was just get a corner and you're automatically going to be 1-0 up. So while Gigo, I think, has played very well this season, I think he's just making the odd costly error now and again, which is, look, it's Spartak. That's just one of those things that happens, and I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest, if it was just a result of the enormous pressure that so many of the players are constantly on when they're playing in that red and white shirt. But I think David, I'm gonna have to agree with you again. I think Yevgeniev, he's just been brilliant, and I keep harkening back to the game, 2 games after that loss to Arsenal Tula. It was when Dinamo hosted Zenit, and Zenit at the time were flying. They scored in every single game in the season at the start of the season. They were well ahead at the top of the table, and then they travelled to Dinamo, and it was the switch to a back 3, and it was Yevgeniev, Ordets, and Sunic, I think, as Sunic got the late winner with a header, and Yevgeniev just led that defence, and that was when you really started to take notice of just how mature this guy is for a 20-year-old centre-back. So I think it's going to have to be perhaps Yevgeniev for the first centre-back choice, unless anyone's got any.
No, I definitely will not be objecting to being 3 for 3 so far.
God damn it.
I'm good with that. That's fine.
So next is the other centre back. Now we can mix it around and go with some of the guys we've already mentioned. I will start off by my nomination being Igor Dveev at Siska, another young centre back who's really blossoming in his career this season, and like Yevgeniev at Dinamo, has already become the leader in the defence at such a young age. And Richard, how about you?
Do you know? Yeah, I'll probably go with Diveev as well. I think that, like you said, he's had to take on extra responsibility too this year, hasn't he? Because obviously, Cisco in the summer signed Bruno Fuchs from Internacional in Brazil, but obviously he's been beset by injury problems. We've only seen him in one game so far, and he's apparently had further injury issues during the winter break, which will keep him out even longer. So, considering that he was signed to be Diveev's starting partner in defence, and Diveev's not played alongside him at all, really. Considering that extra responsibility Diveev has had to take on, then I think he's done excellently well. And him and Yevgeniev, I think, are definitely going to be Spornayer's starting central defence going forward over the next, over the next decade, or well, over this decade, really, over the 2020s. So yeah, I'm good to give Diveev the second centre back spot.
And David, who's your nomination?
Well, I'd also shortlisted Murillo and Diveev, but they weren't my top choices. Murillo I sort of discounted for those, as you pointed out, a couple of games. There's one game in particular, but I can't remember the opponent. It might have been the Khimki game. It might even be one of the Champions League games. I just remember him getting caught out a couple of times with long balls over the top. And so I sort of discounted him for that. And purely because obviously his most showy games were in Europe, where he was really excellent for Loco. And Diveev, as much as I like him, I love Diveev. I think he's an excellent defender. Echo everything you've said. It was the Serbia game where he started, and he had a bit of a nightmare in that first half. I think was probably at fault for probably two of the goals. I think they went, what was it, 4-0 at half time maybe? And Yevgeniev came on second half, replaced Diveev, and got his debut there. So just for that one, I think I discounted him, although they've both been excellent. I also had Pavel. I know you've both mentioned two Spartak defenders. I actually had the third Spartak defender, Pavel Maslov, in mind as a fifth choice. He's. I think he's been pretty good. I don't watch Spartak maybe as closely as you guys. Obviously you, James. I know you mentioned to me yesterday that you were slightly surprised by that.
Yeah.
I was using, my memories of the season and stats, and statistically, he was rated one of the highest. I think he was in the top 3 centre backs for Instat rating in the entire Premier League. So that sort of reinforced my thoughts that he'd had a good season. So that's why I had him down. But I actually went for Rostov defender Osipenko. Of course.
Yeah, he's who,
he lost his partner Chistyakov, who went off to Zenit, and it's quite strange actually because him and Chistyakov have a very similar career path. They both came to Rostov via Tambov, which is very strange. And I think they were even a partnership back in Tambov. Osipenko's taken over, working back there in the defence with Hadzika Dunic, and he's playing really, really well. He's not a big, young, showy defender like Yevgeniev or Maslov one for the future. He's one there who's at the peak of his career pretty much right now, and he's just playing very solidly. And if Zenit didn't get Chistyakov, you sort of would have pictured them going for Osipenko instead, because they're both sort of operating at a very similar level, and he's had a very good season.
I must admit, I forgot to mention Osipenko. He was my first choice on my team as well. It was Osipenko and Diveev alongside each other, but Osipenko's been so good this season.
I'd actually totally forgotten about him. I haven't seen a huge amount of Rostov, to be fair.
I've talked so well about Yevgeniev that I talked you away from your first choice, and then I've reminded you of your first choice.
Yeah, it has to be Osipenko, to be honest. I know I nominated Diveev, but I'm just remembering just how good Osipenko has been and how how solid he was, to especially when, well, it was interesting when Chistikov made his move, because before then Osipenko and Chistikov were probably performing around to a similar level. Slightly different players. Osipenko's a bit more of a brute. He's a bit more of a traditional centre back in that case. Chistikov's much more comfortable on the ball, and I presume that's probably the reason why Zenit went for Chistikov over Osipenko. But all the way through the season, Osipenko was the leader in that defence. He was like the pack leader, if we're going to take a metaphor from rugby, and that he has been an absolute beast. And when we were getting our nominations together, I looked at some of the more in-depth statistics, and if I'm not 100% sure on this because I didn't have the time, to be honest, to get through the entire season, but I went through the first 15 game weeks, and in every single one of them, Rostov hadn't conceded a single header from a set piece when Osipenko was on the pitch, which is just quite incredible. And he's played every game this season. It wasn't 15, it was like 10 or 12. He's played every game this season, played every minute of every game this season, and it's just an absolute rock at the back for Rostov. And one of the reasons why Rostov are so difficult to beat in the air, he's just that big, brutish, traditional defender. I mean, I don't want to sell him short because he's better on the ball, but in a duel in the air or on the ground, his positioning is just absolutely brilliant at this level in the RPL. Yeah, I'm probably going to have to go Osipenko because I forgot to mention him. He was supposed to be my one I was going to say. So to expedite matters, we'll just move straight on to left back. My first nomination is, I know, a little bit of bias in here, so if I'm wrong and totally out of this, completely correct me, but I think it's Ayrton Lucas, which it's a very close one between him and Douglas Santos, who's also had a very strong season for Zenit, and once again another Zenit player who's just a picture of consistency. But I've been really, really impressed by the way that Ayrton's taken to Tedesco, and how Tedesco's basically transforming, or has tried to transform at least to an extent, Spartak from what was just a team that would basically dominate the ball and do very little with it in the final third, to what is rightfully so the side who have been one of the closer challenges to Zenit all season until late on. And a big reason for that is Ayrton's marauding runs down the left. David, who do you think?
Yeah, I also had Ayrton as my top choice, with Dmitry Skopintsev just behind. It was very tight. I think I've actually only literally just made the decision. But Ayrton's my pick. I think alongside Douglas, he's up there for the best left back in the league. And Douglas, we haven't picked Douglas. He was there as our team of the year pick last year. But I'm sort of taking Zenit's European performances into consideration, and Douglas being a bit of an all-rounder. He's played all over the shop this season. He filled in at centre-half when Rakitsky was out. He played in centre-mid when they had several injuries as well. So just for that reason, I've gone with Ayrton.
Yeah, he's one of those players who kind of suffers from his versatility, unfortunately for him. So it's kind of difficult to put him in that one position when you've got Ayrton performing so well, but that 12th man will almost certainly be Douglas Santos. Richard, who would you think for left back?
Oh, we all agree on this one then. Yes, I'm going for Ayrton as well to make it 3 out of 3. Definitely been he's been excellent this season under Tedesco, developing the defensive side of his game as well as the attacking side, which he always had, and some of his link-up play with the forwards in the wing-back formation, I think has been excellent. So yeah, I'm definitely in agreement with you two there. I had Santos down as my number 2. Yeah, there's a case for Skopintsev as well. I think he's had another one who's had a good season, but yeah, I'm going to go for Ayrton as well to make it 3 out of 3. So he's our left back.
Yeah, Ayrton would be the left back in the team of the autumn, but if it was worst tattoos of the autumn, he would also definitely be the left back in that, because that one on his neck is just absolutely horrendous. Now, we'll do the midfielders together. I wanted to try and avoid this because it's a very, very packed midfield, and I have 6 nominations because I had 3 for each position. And if any of 2 of these 6 are picked, I would genuinely be happy because they're all so ridiculously close together. But in the interest of expediting the process, I'll go with a Rubian player. David, you'll be happy, and that's Abdelgar in central midfield. And David, who do you think for your two?
Are we going with both? Are we at this point?
Yeah, just to expedite the process.
Yeah, my two centre mids were Oliver Abelgor, same as you, the Ruben midfielder, and who was the other one? Christian Naboa, of course.
You said Alex Kral wrong there.
The eternal Christian Naboa.
And Richard?
I still went for Barrios, although I will confess Abelgard has a very good season for Rubin. Yeah, he's a player who's caught my eye as well. The other one, I've gone for Alex Kral. I've gone for Kral and Barrios. Although I did think about Naboa. Naboa has had an excellent season considering his age and considering how well Sochi performed. Tough one.
Now, I intentionally didn't say my second one just to see what you would both say, because my second one is so close between Kral and Naboa that I genuinely don't have a clue which one I would go for. I think Kral, it looks like he could get his big move this month, and if he doesn't, he certainly will in the very, very near future. And it's absolutely deserved. He is the driving force behind Tedesco with Spartak. The only thing about Kral I would say is that although it's not his job, he does have a nosebleed every time he gets too much altitude up the pitch. But Christian Naboa, what a season he is having. Nobody would have expected him to quite turn into basically Sochi's main man for everything. Brilliant defensively, brilliant going forwards. He's one of the leading goal scorers in the competition. Set pieces just set up pretty much every single other Sochi goal. And a large reason as to why Sochi performing at such a high level this season is down to Naboa. And I genuinely wouldn't have expected to have Naboa in a team of the autumn or season or whatever in 2021 at the age of 36. But I think we all mentioned him. I think we'd probably be right in inferring that he could be the first name on the team sheet. And then I will go and say, David, so your other one was Abdelgar. Now, how about if I hear Abdelgar and suggest perhaps a player that I know you are a massive fan of in Obliakov at Siska?
Well, he is on my list. He was on my short list. As was Krau, as was Barrios. They were all on my short list, as was Kings Kanga out of Arsenal Tula.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good.
But since we're picking, centre midfielders / defensive minded midfielders, Abelgor, has been incredibly good this season. He's up there. Is the highest number of interceptions, highest number of tackles. I think one of the highest blocks as well. Very high pass accuracy. If we're taking external things in, things such as team of the weeks or things like that, he's constantly picking up in there. He's picked up his Danish international debut. I was just reading a Slutsky interview the other day where he was singing his praises, just saying how much he's done for the team. Rubin's two defenders, I think, are one of the lowest in terms of tackles and blocks because Abelgard is doing it all for them, basically. So for that reason, I picked him ahead of Obliakov, who, yes, I really like and I think's had an excellent season. But Naboa was a must-have in the team. And while Obliakov has been very, very good, and Krau has been good, Barrios has been decent. Not as he's still up there as one of the best players in the league. But I just felt Abelgor. Yes, you're all going to say I am a Ruben fan. I probably do have some Ruben bias, but I think his role in the team and his statistics show how good he has been since. And he's a fresh arrival in the league as well. Let's remember that. Yeah. So he's been really excellent, and he was one of my first names down on my list.
Yeah, it shows the sort of quality of football that he's been playing. That he was in Denmark for AAB Aalborg before he made his move to Rubin. But it's after he made the move to Rubin that he actually got his Denmark debut against Sweden on
Absolutely.
almost to stay. So, and I'm in agreement with Barrios, and it perhaps is a little unfair that if this was purely who is the best 11 players or best in each position in the league, Vilmar Barrios absolutely will be one of the two central midfielders, without a shadow of a doubt, in my opinion. But, and like I say, perhaps this is a little bit harsh to judge him by his own extremely high standards. But I just think he's been a little bit of a shadow of a player that he was last season. Now, I'm not sure if that's the Zenit's general performances in Europe that's weighing in the back of my mind or not, or if it is just the surprise at how far Abdelgar has come this season. But I think it would be remiss not to get Abdelgar and Nabor in those two defensive midfield positions. Richard, what do you think? Would you be happy with Abdelgar in there?
Yeah, I know we're about time. I'll be quick. Yeah, I'll be happy with that because also as well, in comparison to someone like Nabor who's been getting forward and scoring, and has historically been a deeper playmaker. Abdelgar adds balance as being a pure defensive midfielder, so actually it's a good balance too. So yeah, although I'm open to that. Yeah, that's a good balance. Kral and Nabor are both good shouts, but I think Nabor has definitely with his goals, and like I say, it's good. It's a good balance with Abdelgard in the a deep playmaker and a pure defensive midfielder in Abdelgard. So yeah, that's a good deep midfield too for me.
It pains me not to put Alex Kral in this team, but
yeah, me too.
The others been so good.
It pains me when you pronounce Abdelgard wrong.
I've pronounced everything wrong. We're used to it by now. All the listeners know this. But in my defence, I was the one who wanted to get Yevgeniev correct. Now, number 10. There's only one man who's going to be the number 10. This will be the shortest part of the team by quite some distance. He's been the best player in the league this season so far by quite some distance, and it's, of course, the Croatian Modric in Nikola Vlasic. I would come to you guys on that one, but I'm going to just expedite the process here, because unless you've got any objections at all to Vlasic being our number 10.
No, we could wax lyrical about him, but in the honour of time, let's just say we all love him.
No objections.
Yeah. By far, right now, the most talented and informed player in the league. And then out wide, once again, I'll go for both of my nominations first. I think one of them is a surefire hit, but I'll happy to hear your opinions on that. And that's my first nomination in Remy Cabella. No matter if it's been in the league or in Europe, Krasnodar have just looked tons better sides when he's been involved. The part of their really rocky run was when he was completely out of the team due to, I think it was COVID. And just before and after that, his return is just night and day. Some of the goals he's scored this season, just the quality of the finishes is just unbelievable. He's been all over the pitch. This is the Cabella who's performing to the high elite level that Krasnodar wanted last year for Europe, and unfortunately lost almost straight away with a long-term injury. And the other one on the opposite side is the young Dinamo winger who deservedly earned his call from his big move, from Arsenal, and that's Daniel Lesavoy. David, who would you think to have out wide?
Yep, I had Lesavoy down on the left wing. As much as it begrudged me to not include future Kvaratskhelia, I think Lesavoy has had, he certainly had a more productive season, and more experienced player, and he has had a better season. I had to pick him. He's been really, really good. And on the right, it was hard, this one, because obviously by nature you think of Cabella as being a central midfielder, but he has been playing out wide. So initially I had Konstantin Kuchayev down as a right-sided player, although he isn't really a winger or a wide player by default. So it's a tough one. I could go, if we're happy to put those down, I'd be happy to go with either Kuchayev or Remy Cabella, because Kuchayev really stepped up when Siska was struggling at the start of the season, and come up with a lot of goals after he'd also, let's remember, had a very long layoff with injury, missed almost the entirety of the previous season. So both those guys have a similar story. Missed a lot of last season, the comeback, and have had big impacts on the team.
Yeah.
So if I was pressed, I think I probably would pick Cabela just purely for the European performances that he put in. But yeah, Kuchayev was a close pick, as was Kavicha on the left. And I also think Lomovitsky has had a good season as well.
Oh. Oh. Yeah, I could easily put Kachayev in either ahead of Lesovoy. To be honest, they both had similar seasons where they've been very much a young, but what lots of stereotypical wingers are at their age, where they're not necessarily in the game all of the time, but when they are in it, they really make it count. It's kind of like the opposite of Kavicha, because Kavicha is just a dribble merchant with not the best end product, whereas Kachayev and Lesovoy are in all of the time, but then when they do, they make it count. Richard, who would you nominate for wingers?
I'd probably go with. I'm definitely going to go with Cabela based on the fact that the European performances, like I say, when he came back into the side, Krasnodar's performances in Europe and general overall play really went up a notch. I think he was crucial to that victory against Rennes, which got them European football after Christmas. You could tell all those years of experience playing in Ligue 1 made such a difference, and it galvanised the rest of the team. He was a level of player which the RPL needs more of, and you could tell his experience made the difference in that game, and his form since coming back into the side after early season layoffs has been very good. And Krasnodar recently have started to climb the table too. I still think there's an outside chance they could finish in the top three, if they carry on performing the way they did before the break. So yeah, I've got to have Cabella in there. And I'm going to agree. I'm going to go with Lesovoy. Lesovoy and Kavicha were my two on the left side. And I'm going to go with Lesovoy. Maybe a little bit of bias, obviously, me covering Dinamo for the site, but he's been very good generally. He had a good season last season, and he's built on it this season. And I think he'll be a key man for Dinamo in the new year. So yeah, I'm going to go for Lesovoy and Cabela alongside Vlasic.
Yeah, I think if I want to give some of the listeners a little peek behind the RFN curtain, the recording software we use has a button to basically let people know when they would like to jump in to join the conversation. And as soon as I said that Kavicha was a dribble merchant, I just glanced to the left of me and just saw David's little hand just immediately pop up.
It's not even about Kavicha that I wanted to mention. It was the fact that you didn't say Lesovoy was. Lesovoy has only made 30 less dribbles than Kavicha has in the league. He is the second highest dribbler in the league by a distance, those two. So they're both, as you might say, dribble merchants. And I think it's something it's really evolving in the league at the moment. We've got a lot of very talented players on the ball. Makarov at Rubin on the right side is also up there in the top four for dribbles, but just behind Bernard Berisha, who we all know is a ridiculous knock and run dribbler with his outrageous pace. And the player who we already picked, Ayrton, is the fifth in terms of attempted dribbles from left wing back, and that's again because of his outrageous pace. Ejuke is getting there, but he's a little way behind. We know from his time in Holland that he loves to dribble, and we've seen it at Siska, but he's not just quite had the minutes in the league, nor has he got it going. But yeah, it's weird. We've got on one side we've got two really dynamic wingers. We've gone on the left. We've gone with Lesovoy and Kavicha as our top picks. Dynamic, pacey, will just take people on whenever they get the chance. And on the right side, we've picked two abstract wingers who are really more like playmakers in Kuchayev and Cabela, which on a pitch would actually be quite probably interesting to watch. But perhaps slightly unbalanced, but yeah, I think Lesovoy, they've both got different styles of their dribbling. Lesovoy is one of those guys who'll beat you in little quick spurts, and he's closer in tight knit. Whereas Kavicha will run at a player who'll generally try and beat them down the line. But yeah, they both had really good seasons, and I was tough on myself to not pick Kavicha because I do think Lesovoy has had a better season, and they both got big futures. And it was a shame when Lesovoy got called up to Spornaya and then missed out with, I think he had COVID, because he would have really been a nice addition to the team at that point.
Yeah, especially when at the time a lot of Sponaya's first choice wingers were unavailable, such as Lyosha and Golovin were both out, and Cheryshev himself had only just came back from injury and clearly lacked match sharpness. And then it would have been really nice to see Lesavoy get some minutes for the first team, and instead of 85-year-old Yonov out wide. But I think Lesavoy and Cabela's are nice, like I said, nicely balanced and fair. But some of the guys that I had down on my list is I had Berisha down, but then I crossed him out and remembered that Wanderson was playing, but was playing very, very well at the start of the season. At the first 5 to 10 games or so, Wanderson was kind of leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else.
He was ridiculous. I remember waxing lyrical on the pod about him being, the most formed player in the league. And then, what was it, the Pout game? He got injured, and man, he was such a big miss for them in the Champions League. It was such a shame.
Yeah, and it's just he hasn't really spent enough minutes, as many minutes on the pitch as some of the other guys, or had as big of an impact on that individual side season, purely because of, like you said, his injuries. And I would like to stick a little one in here for Jordan Larson, because I think Jordan Larson has been one of the best players for Spartak, and is just such a creative, talented footballer. But unfortunately, because of the way we do these teams, you get the odd player that doesn't quite fit into the way the team's set up. You have to really pick at the start a formation to go with. So that automatically rules out, say, some of the guys who play, some of the teams who play a back three with that position either side of the striker, that sort of inside forward second striker position that both Larson and Kachayev played before Goncharenko. Larson for Spartak and Kachayev for Siska before Goncharenko changed to a back four, fit into. And there's just no way to kind of fit him into the team, in my opinion, even though I think he's been very good for Spartak, if slightly inconsistent too. And another one I would like to basically highlight here is Antoshka and Anton Moranchuk, I think, stepping up in his brother's shoes very well, to the extent that eventually you can mention Antoshka without having to mention his brother, and it's more than deserved, because he must have heard that probably his entire career so far. But he's not quite there for me yet, and I genuinely prefer him in the middle rather than out wide. I think that's where his future will be. I think he's fast and he can use his pace to great effect, and that's generally why he was played out wide, because he was faster than his brother. But he's showing now he can be just as creative at this level. So I would like to see more of that. And I like what you said, David, about the wingers, sort of that this sort of troop of very fast, direct wingers, exciting wingers to watch, who are all developing in the RPL at the same time right now. And it reminds me of an interview that I think it was Kenta Hashimoto had, where he interviewed in his one of his native news sites in Japan, and they were asking him about the difference between the J League and the RPL, and what it's been like to step up. And he, from a technical point of view, tactical point of view, he said that the RPL is far less technical. You're not as expected to say have to track back quite as much. I think it was I'm sure it was Hashimoto, but he said that the pace is just unbelievably. So he's never played football at this pace before, and that is one thing about the RPL that's sort of unexpected. You hear these aphorisms that it's a very defensive league, and of course the goal scorers are always quite low compared to others. It is just as a fact one of the lowest goal scoring leagues in Europe over the last, of top leagues in Europe over the last 5 years. It is the lowest goals on average, but just because it's a defensive league doesn't necessarily mean that there's not exciting football. And in the last year or 18 months or so, we've really seen some really dynamic wingers coming through. What do you think, Richard?
I'm just going to go back to the Jordan Larson thing nomination, James. Yeah, he is a bit unlucky because, like I say, he's had a very, very good season for Spartak. I think him and Ponce have linked very, very well. Zikwa Ponce have linked very, very well as a front two. And like I say, he's sort of a bit unlucky, really, because Vlasic is the central one of the three that we've picked in behind the striker. And obviously Vlasic is more of an attacking midfielder. So he has been a bit unlucky, I have to say. But yeah, I'm definitely going to put him in there as probably a reserve Larson, because he's definitely a superb second striker playing off a front man. And also one last quick other honourable mention I'm going to give is Bakitar Zayutdinov. I think he's been generally quite a good, consistent player. Played a number of different positions for CSKA, the best summer signing, only €2 million. Doesn't count on the foreign limit too. And he was initially just seen as just a good squad filler option, but I think he's shown his impressive versatility. He's played left back, he's played left wing. So yeah, I'll throw Zayutdinov in there as an honourable shout too.
Yeah, I think Zayutdinov's another one like Douglas Santos, where when it comes to these sort of composition of 11 players in a team, his versatility really does work against him, even though he's a dream to have in a squad. He's been brilliant for CSKA. And I think we've mentioned quite a few times on pods in the past that we wouldn't have expected him to have been CSKA's best signing, but it's not even close. He's by far and away CSKA's best signing of the summer, and it's really, really taken it like a duck to water at a bigger club. So, David, last word on wingers?
Yeah, just coming back on what you said about Hashimoto, and I've seen interviews with Huang and Saito, I think, both the Asian players who are at Rubin, who had said similar things about the pace of the league compared to the MLS or the J League or the K League, where they played in the past. And interesting thing I noted about their interviews is that Huang especially noted that when asked about Kvicha, about playing with Kvicha, because the Russian press, like it was a Russian interview, and he said, we do get frustrated on the pitch when he loses the ball, because as a player who dribbles so much, he's going to lose the ball sometimes, just by the pure nature of it. But he said that the coach had told them not to get angry at him, and that don't blame Kvicha, blame Slutsky, because Slutsky is looking to get the best out of Kvicha, and therefore doesn't want to limit him. And he said the same about Makarov on the other side. And I found that quite interesting. That basically Slutsky's trying to nurture him in a way. He's just not giving him any limitations. He's encouraging him to go out there and do what he does best. And I found that quite interesting because, I think as you'd expect, you see in Kvicha with probably a free pass onto someone in the middle, but he tries to take on his fullback, and his dribble rate is just over 50%. But he has by far and away the most dribbles attempted, so he's got the most completed at the same time. So 1 in 2 dribbles he's going to work, and 1 isn't going to work. So if you're watching him thinking, there's a free pass here, play it to me, you might not get past him. But then half the time he does, and half the time he'll get into a dangerous situation. So I thought that was just quite an interesting thing that to note about that. And I wonder if that's something we're seeing around the league. It was this time last year where he and Arunov, who was at Ufa at the time, were breaking through, and they both had those dynamic breakthroughs into the first team of their respective clubs. And I hope we get more of them coming through.
Yeah, hopefully. That's really interesting on Slutsky. It's actually just the most Leonid Slutsky thing you'll ever hear in your life. I mean, I don't want to sell the bloke short. He's done great at clubs he's been at in the past, but one thing that Slutsky will probably be remembered for quite a lot is he's just an incredibly efficient manager, and a genuinely just lovely bloke. Whenever you see like him singing the Christmas carols during the winter that went viral on RFN Socials.
That was superb.
Like that's just typical of Slutsky, just to take it on the chin and say, yeah, blame me, not him, take it out on me.
Well, yeah, I mean, Slutsky's always seemed, in all the interviews I've seen with him, like they always ask him about Kvicha, and he's always said, look, I've worked with players, he's got a good record. Slutsky is responsible for developing Alexander Golovin and Martin Odegaard. Like that's 2 pretty impressive players to have on your resume for a manager who hasn't, let's be honest, been around much. And let's also just add to that, for English-based, Jared Bowen. Slutsky was the guy who gave Bowen his breakthrough at Hull. So he's obviously got a knack for working with younger players. So yeah, I'm excited to see how it carries on. Kvicha's been excellent. He scored 5 goals in 5 games over this winter break. So I'm excited to see him in the second half of the season.
Yeah, I mean, when I was talking about being a dribble merchant before, it is mainly just
for I knew it was tongue-in-cheek.
He is, but I do think the one part of his game that needs to develop is his final product, and more so decision-making. But the good thing about having that is it's definitely something that can be developed quite easily, can be coached. That natural innate pace and ability to beat a man is far more difficult to coach than decision-making. He's still only just turned 20 or still 19. That's going to come with
turns
time.
20 in 2 days' time as of the recording.
Yeah.
So yeah, very very young still. Plenty of time to learn. And if we're basing it off this winter, then it's starting already.
Him and UK, yeah, the end product will improve. It's a question of young players. It happens all the time, but I'm absolutely convinced the pair of them that the end product will improve.
Yeah. So we'll move on to the final position on the pitch, and that's up front. Now, I think we could perhaps have quite a nice little debate on my hands here, because now one of the reasons we went with a 4-2-3-1 this year. We discussed this in advance and save yourselves from all the droning on of the nitty gritty behind the scenes, and it's basically there's not been too many strikers who have really caught the league by fire this season or really stood out. But of those that have, I think it's pretty damn close between them, compared to, say, in midfield, where Vlasic was an automatic choice no matter what, and then just behind him, and out wide, the competition's so fierce it could literally be 5 completely different names, and every single one of them you would think, oh yeah, that makes sense. So to start off with, my first choice and nomination and current leading scorer, if I remember correctly, of course, would have to be, for me, Sardar Azmoun. Richard, who do you nominate?
I think I'll probably go just for Azmoun, because we had that electric start. There was then those injury issues, and then just before the winter break, he came back into form, was scoring those goals. He was very impressive against Spartak in the final game before the winter break. And then George Despotovic from Rubin was also on my shortlist, because also I think he's massively improved Rubin this season. Because obviously that was the position that they were lacking, and they got him on a free transfer from Orenburg. And when he's made a difference to Rubin's attack. I will probably edge towards Azmoun, although Despotovic was a nice one to have in consideration as well. So yeah, I'll probably go just with Azmoun, although it was tight.
David, Adair, I presume, for your nomination?
Well, I'll play devil's advocate a little bit, and my top choice, with probably some Rubin bias in there, was Despotovic, with Azmoun just behind. My reasoning behind that being, Azmoun did miss a chunk of the season there in the middle. Missed a couple of big chances in a couple of European games, as I recall. Was excellent, very admittedly excellent, in that last little run before winter break. That game, was it Ural where they won 5? They scored 5 at home. I can't remember, and he got like a hat trick and an assist. He was terrific in that one. And you're also wondering now, like, he's what, 20? I want to say 25, 26. Could this be his last season in Russia? He's been in Russia since he was 17. But I digress. I went for Despot just purely because of his impact on the team. He's not scored as many goals, and he only scored 7 in comparison to Azmoun. But when Despot isn't in the Rubin side, they're just not going to win, full stop. He has such a big impact on how Rubin are playing. With even Ignatiev just not suiting the way that Rubin are playing right now, Despot is a perfect striker. He's a really good hold-up player. He scores goals. He's confident. He's got experience. And yeah, that was why I picked him just about over Azmoun. As much as I have, love Azmoun, I've followed him for his entire career so far. I just had to go for my man Despot.
It's quite funny that these two are totally different players, but when you try and have to sit down and anachronistically compare the two, they are actually quite similar. Now, you said that Despot has only got 7 goals this season, but Rubin Kazan themselves have only scored 24 goals. Now, Despot's contribution on goals alone is 29% of all Rubin goals have been Despot, which is the joint highest in the league alongside Noboa at Sochi. Now, ironically, just behind Despot is Azmoun, in that his 11 goals this season is 26% of Zenit's 43, and of course Zuba is just the same with 26% of Zenit's 43 too. They both have missed quite a few games from injury this season. Despot more than you would like, because I agree, he makes Rubin tick more than any other. But I think Azmoun equally also makes Zenit tick this season. Just look at look at Zenit's record without Azmoun in the RPL, and with Azmoun, sorry. And last time they lost with Azmoun was all the way back in August, and that was that 1-0 defeat away to Dinamo when Yevgeniev and Sunjic basically decided to have the game of their careers. Every single other game since then, Azmoun starts, Zenit win. When they score lots of goals, Azmoun's always on the score sheet. Now, the big one against Azmoun is ironically his striking partner, who has scored just as many goals as he has. Pretty much scores in the same games, because whenever Azmoun scores, it seems to be that Zuba scores. It's a weird one at Zenit, because you often see in teams, to go to my own team's greatest rivals, Newcastle, to have them in as a metaphor, when they signed Demba Ba, I think he got like 10 in between 10 and 15 goals in the season up until January, and then they signed Pape Cisse, who then got 10 to 15 goals from January. But if whenever they started together, they never ever both scored. Or when Pape Cisse would go on a big run, Demba Ba wouldn't score in that time period. He didn't score again at all until the very end of the season, when Cisse had dried up his goals. And then following on to the next season, it was a total opposite, where one would go on the other run, on a big run. And that does happen actually quite a lot. It has throughout history.
Yeah, I remember
Way
that.
back
I
in
remember that
the
Newcastle period. Yeah, I remember when it was one time Bar scoring, the next time Papi Cisse scoring over a couple of month runs. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when you go all the way back to the 60s, you had Valentin Ivanov and Edouard Streltsov playing up top together for Torpedo Moscow. And it sounds ridiculous to say, because they're two of the most legendary figures in Soviet history, but they never ever scored in the same game. Like, which is just unbelievable considering the sheer amount of goals that they both got for Torpedo in that time. But they never scored together, and you often see that strikers play in tandem, where one has a purple patch, the other one dries out a little bit. But the incredible thing about these two at Zenit is that whenever they score, they tend to both score. So they beat Ufa 6-0, they both grabbed goals. They beat Tambov 4-1, they both got goals. They beat Ural 5-1, they both got goals. They beat Dinamo and Spartak, they both got goals. So it is quite an interesting and intriguing argument as to do you go for what I think is Zenit's best player, and who is the best player in the league in his position right now in Azmoun, or the man who basically, when he's missing, Ruben turned to shit. So David, I'll jump back to you. What would you say about Despot to convince otherwise?
Well, I mean, the fact that I think we've not picked a single Zenit player so far, and they're top of the league, so it almost makes me want to lean more towards Azmoun. It was a tough pick, and I I do have the Ruben bias and was playing some devil's advocate just to add a name in there. I had my legitimate reasons for having Despot in my top two there. And in my head now I'm thinking, do we have Azmoun in there just to have a Zenit player? Because I'm pretty sure we haven't picked a Zenit player so far.
No, there's no Zenit players,
which is bizarre. Which it is strange to say. Obviously, I think we were all including their European performances in there, which was so disappointing. But domestically, last year they had the clean sweep in defence, and this year Rakitsky has not been so good. Lovren has been decent, and then obviously the fullbacks, as we noted already, Karavaev's been not at the same level, and Douglas has been all over the shop in terms of where he's been playing. So I think we all noted, I think in general, from the star players, Barrios, Karavaev, a slightly lower level. But Azmoun's that one guy whose level hasn't really dropped between the two seasons. The only time he had a little purple, or whatever the opposite of the purple patches, was that spell where he was injured just before it as well, and in Europe where he, I felt he struggled, which is a shame. But so yeah, I sort of feel like I could be convinced to go for Azmoun here.
Yeah, I think for me it has to be just the the sheer quality of the goals that he scores. Those ones late on against Dinamo and Spartak, some of them were just out of this world. That move where it was just one touch football and then volleyed into the net. It was just a brilliant goal. And to quickly jump on Zenit for a second, the three players who were really unlucky not to get a look into this team are probably Barrios, Ostoyev, and Santos. I think they've all played brilliantly this season. Doug, like I said before, they're all just very consistent. Not quite as good as last year, but still performing to an exceedingly high level, and that's why Zenit are top of the league by 4 points of Siska now. But Zenit have won the league the last 2 seasons because they've steamrolled it and because they didn't have the November curse, the old winter curse that they had that there's articles on the site about. And where they always have a patchy November, it ended Mancini's career in Zenit. Basically, he never recovered from that terrible run that they went on. And this year they did have that. They lost against Bruges, Rubin, Dortmund in a row, and then Lazio. They lost against drew with Akhmat, lost against Lazio, drew with Arsenal, lost against Bruges. I mean, of course, these European games do make it look worse. If it's just the RPL, it's still decent run of form. Not by Zenit's high standards, and not by the high standards of these players who absolutely dominated our end of season awards last season. 7 of the 11 players was Zenit. I never expected, and it pained me so much as a Spartak fan to stick all them in there. But they absolutely deserved it, and this isn't anything against Zenit this season. And I'm sure most of you Zenit fans who are listening right now would probably agree that Zenit just don't look as good as they did last season, even domestically, just not quite as good. There's a lot of players who have either been a little bit iffy on form, not really picking up the levels of last year, or have missed large chunks again, like Malcolm. Malcolm's been excellent this season, but he's missed large chunks of it. And I think just the sheer underperforming in Europe, just how terrible they are, more than any other team, is the one thing that I simply can't get out the back of my mind. It's not just the players; it is also the system, the structure of Russian football holding them back, the managerial issues. It's like a long list of problems that basically created the worst possible run for Zenit. But Zenit are by far and away the richest club in Russia right now. They by far and away got the easiest draw of any of the clubs. They've got the best team, pound for pound, the best players, but they're completely and utterly underperformed in every single game. The 2 performances against Bruges were just rank awful. Bruges knew exactly what to do, how to attack them, and how to to pick them apart. And that young lad who scored the last goal in the opening game to beat them 3-0. They scored the opening goal to beat them, and then beat them 3-0 in the reverse fixture. He's just got the freedom of the box just to ghost in and get the goal. It was just terrible defending, and for that, like you said yesterday, David, we just can't. I personally can't really separate Zenit's European form from the league form this season, while also accepting that Zenit are only in that position because they're so good at the same time. Richard, what do you think as your last word in Zenit?
Yeah, just to go back to the point about Azmoun and about you mentioned about the age. Yeah, he's at 26. I did post in a RFN chat on Facebook that there was a link to a champion article. They'd taken it from Sport Express, I think, and I think it was Azmoun mentioning that he feels now that he's ready to go abroad now, apparently, and I think he's probably acknowledging now at 26 that if he waits any longer after this summer, he might not get that move. And I'm beginning to think now he's stayed in Russia 8 years. He can speak Russian in interviews, which is really unique for a foreign player who comes to Russia, especially one from a non-ex-Soviet Union country. And he speaks Russian in interviews now relatively well. And I think he's probably done his dues here. Come the end of the season, I think he probably will move on. And, at 26, he doesn't want to miss the boat. I think he's contracted till 2022. I don't know that for certain, but obviously he'd only have 1 year left on his contract, so it might be within Zenit's interest as well to get some money on him. And I think I'd like to see him go abroad now. I think he's got to the stage now. 8 years, he's done brilliantly well in Russia, scored goals since he signed for Zenit. He's been a revelation. But yeah, I'm beginning to think now that we mentioned earlier about him thinking about getting to that age where he's ready to move abroad. I think even he himself acknowledges now that at 26, footballers are breaking into teams younger and younger, and if he doesn't go now, when will he go? So, there's always looking out for younger stars players now, especially in a COVID era, where there's probably going to be less big transfers. So I think at 26, Asmoon probably is at that stage where he's ready to go abroad. But yeah, about the team, I take on board those points about Zenit, James. But again, I'm probably leaning towards putting Asmoon in this team because he has still been a shining beacon of consistency. Yeah, some of the performances in Europe weren't great, and he has been injured a little bit, but he's still so crucial for Zenit.
Yeah. David, any last words on Zenit, Asmoon, or Despot, maybe?
No last word. I mean, I think I'm firmly behind the Asmoon push here now. I think we've acknowledged that the Despot's role is important there. And obviously Asmoon does work well in that pair. But he has been very good again. And let's be honest, even if he doesn't go, he could still go to prison and get a move to Fiorentina in 5 years' time. So
Fire a disastrous spell at Spartak 2 again as well. So that's the full RFN Premier League team of the season. So to quickly run through it one last time: in goal, Ilya Landratov; right back, Mario Fernandez; the two centre backs are Roman Yevgeniev and Maxim Ossipenko; left back, Ayrton Lucas; and then defensive midfielders, Christian Naboa and Oliver Abdelgar; right wing, Remy Cabella; left wing, Daniela Savoy; and then there's the 10, Nikola Vlasic; in behind, Sardar Azmoun up top. Now, we've had some honourable mentions all the way through. All the guys that we've nominated and any other players that came up in conversation are really what would essentially make up the substitutes bench of the team of the autumn. But lastly, David, just nice and quick, who would you want for manager of the autumn?
My first thought when I was posed this was Cherevchenko. I think he's done as much as I hate to admit it, because I don't like Khimki, he's done an excellent job there at Khimki, turning them around and making them competitive. So I'll go with Cherevchenko.
And Richard?
If he'd have been at Khimki at the start of the season and they were a place or two higher in the table, I'd be inclined to agree. However, I'm going to go for Vladimir Fedortov at Sochi to have them fourth in the league and pushing for European qualification. I think is excellent, and got them playing some good football too, scoring goals. So Shevchenko an honourable mention for me, but I'm going to go for Fedortov.
No, I'm going to take the easy option and say I would be happy with either Fedortov or Cherevchenko. I think the way Cherevchenko has transformed Khimki's fortunes around is not necessarily surprising. He's not the greatest manager, to be honest. He's doing well with a decent group, but it was inevitable that Khimki were going to struggle at the start of the season with a fraud like Sergei Yuran in charge. Not Sergei Yuran, sorry. Dmitry Gunka in charge. The pair of frauds, to be honest. But yeah, Gunka was just rank awful. It was a terrible appointment from the start, and to be honest, I'm surprised the sacking came as long as it did. And luckily, because this won't be going on the graphic anywhere, I can sit and happily proclaim that the manager is a combination of both Fedortov and Cherevchenko. And on that bombshell, that's been it for the RFN podcast this week. So thanks again, David and Richard, for joining me.
Not a problem.
Pleasure.
We'll be back again next week to review all the season's action in the Fina L. And then before jumping into a nice preview of Krasnodar and the Europa League. Now, and that's in conjunction, the Fina L one, with David's excellent series in which he's discussed how each side is faring in the Fina L this season. Most of those are live on the site. We'll be having one coming up as soon as we finish recording, and then another one by the end of the week. And we've also embarked on an exciting new journey here at RFN as Hanu and Artem are joined by new signing Connor Duffy in launching the all-new RFN YouTube channel. Now, we've got 2 videos live so far on the World Cup and Hulk. So watch it, subscribe if you haven't yet. And Connor's also creating some fancy new clothes for the pod too, and some new pod thumbnail graphics. So if you let us know what you think of the artwork. And lastly, I ask that you all catch up on my own recent article in which I attempted to try and parse out some of the issues plaguing the nation's football and offer up a kind of an idea for a blueprint for change. So if you let me know your thoughts at Russ Football News on Twitter or RussianFootballNews1@gmail.com via email. Also get in touch to let us know who you would actually have had in your own team in the autumn, and we could read out some of the best next week. So David, where can everyone find you online, and is there anything new in the pipeline for yourself?
You can find me on Twitter at RFN_David. As you already mentioned, the FNL series that's coming out. So there's 2 more to go, and then a little scouting piece on a few players who RPL clubs you could be looking at. And then I'll be back in the Scouted Football Handbook whenever that's released, I think next month. Covering a player who we did discuss today. I'm probably not at liberty to reveal yet, but we did mention him today. So yeah, keep an eye out for that one.
And Richard, how about yourself?
You can find me on Twitter at RichDPike89, at RichDPike89. You can also check out on Heart of Football over Christmas, New Year. On our site Heart of Football, I produced 5 Football Manager 21 teams to be guides. There was a number of Russian RPL teams in there and some other famous names across the 5 guides. So please do check that out. There'll be another article for myself on RFN soon coming up about winter transfers. I recently did a piece of youngsters to watch for RFN and in the RPL in 2021 for RFN, and also a piece on Alexander Kokorin's move to Fiorentina from Spartak. And finally, there'll be more pieces by myself coming out on Heart of Football soon across the beginning of April. So please do check those out.
This has been the RFN Podcast. Goodbye for now.
Идет футбольный матч, летит над полем мяч. Веди его, беги, точнее его ударь. Но мяч берет с ноги решительный вратарь. Не напрасно футбольное поле самых ловких и смелых влечет. Здесь нужны тренировка и воля, быстрота, увлечение, расчет.